survey said.
Hey, welcome back to the library. My name is Jason Dvorak, and it's time to play the Feud. Family Feud has been a television game show staple for my entire life, literally being created the year I was born. It was one of my favorite TV shows to watch because of the flair. The earliest episode would have announced the family names as these huge door panels open to find the family pose to look like an old school picture. They would then walk down the carpet to their places at the staggered podium, and Richard Dawson, yes, that Richard Dawson, would appear and the show would begin. Looking back, there was just something special about the Dawson era. There was almost this cheeky pomp and circumstance angle to it. The well-dressed families, the really well-dressed Richard Dawson, the theme song that sounded like a war was about to break out between two farmers with its fiddle arrangements, and of course, the gigantic answer board in the background. Of all the game shows I watched as a child, this was the one I wanted to be on. I loved it so much I even got the board game for Christmas as a kid. Sadly, the dream of being on the show never really surfaced, but that didn't mean I couldn't pretend I was there. Growing up in video games meant it was almost always accessible in one form or another, so you can imagine my surprise when it came to the PlayStation. If you've never played the game or watched the TV show, the premise is pretty simple. The two families try to guess the correct answers given by folks who have been surveyed. The higher the answer is in the ranking, the better you do. If a family misses 3 times, the other team is allowed a single answer to try and steal the round. After 4 rounds, the family with the most points goes on to the fast money round. When the PlayStation game released, the show was in its 3rd incarnation with comedian Louis Anderson as the host. At that point in my life, I hadn't watched the show in years. Hell, I wasn't really watching much television to begin with. To say things had changed would be an understatement. The pomp and circumstance was gone. It felt almost like a parody of itself. Tiny flat-screen monitors replaced the large, beautiful backdrops. The board itself was now just a projection TV. The announcer sounded more at home on Nickelodeon than on morning television. It was like staring at a world you no longer knew. So you can imagine my shock at the confusion on the PlayStation disc. The soul of the game show was still there, but something was desperately off, and regretfully for this review, a whole lot of it was weird. The game begins with you choosing a set of options, create a family, or head backstage to start the game. It's here in the family creation screen where things start to go weird. The announcer says you can choose a pre-made family or create one, except you can't access the empty slots and there's no create button. You're supposed to choose one of the existing families and then from within their window, hit edit. Since there's no preview of the families in the manual or the game, you'll have to click through to each family to see what you're starting with. There's some basic editing you can do with the faces and body types. And yes, they are as weird looking and bizarre as you think they are. You choose from the body types of a recent drug addict or a Macy's Day float. There's very little in between or around, and you can't even name them individually. During my first run, something odd happened. The male character became female out of nowhere, and then I couldn't get back to the male version. It sort of became like a hybrid of the two. Take that for what you will. The weirder angle here is the introduction of your custom family verbally. You can choose pre-recorded locations with the 2 adjectives to describe your family as they are introduced. These are then spoken during the opening of the game. What makes it weird is that they include mocking and detrimental adjectives. Either they're leaning into a 26-year-old meme I missed, or they figured it'd be a funny way to mock you in player 2. Like, who wants to refer to themselves or their family as petty? And, it was... Oh, God, it was terrible. Once you settle on your virtual family, the game wastes no time getting things started, as well as setting you up for the bountiful amount of full-motion video that's incoming. The next weird thing is the very first set of videos you'll see. The game show's title introduction includes an explosion effect for no reason and adds extra CG cameras that aren't there. Once you get to the green screen of Louis on the CG background, it's really rough. I'm guessing they didn't have footage of him from the show that matched his outfit to have him do a natural introduction. Ready for more weirdness? As the families are introduced, their podiums are backwards. The tall, lit up part should be under the head of the family. Here it's the tail end. That or their color assignments are reversed, since blue should be on the left and orange is on the right. Speaking of colors, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the developers decided they would just completely redesign the set. The aforementioned orange and blue division does not appear in the TV show. It's more of like a turquoise and brown vibe. And it looks really bizarre. Rather than use the TV show's appearance, they sort of just made giant blocks and triangles to fill in the gaps. Were these leftover assets from a failed Jeopardy game? If I could give them the benefit of the doubt, I would guess it was to help players know what side of the screen they're on, i.e., the blue family and the orange family, rather than just the family names. There also appear to be two Jedis battling it out in front of the scoreboard as blue and pink lasers slowly rock back and forth. While they aren't distracting, they'd be really annoying if they were always in front of the answer board. In fact, in doing research for this episode, it looks more like the Mad TV parody than the real show itself. Even weirder, the stage itself isn't built as a single unit. As each screen transitions to the next, the set pieces will start off frame and then slide in. They don't even show up when the camera pans for the whole family, who are all breathing at the exact same time. As an aside, I find it curious that they didn't use an actual set color for the empty background. A simple light blue or even brown from the TV show would have sufficed. The black background just makes it look like you're in an empty warehouse. The gameplay flips between your typing, Louis Anderson's FMV clips, the game board, and then back to Louis again. Adding to the weirdness tally are the FMV clips themselves. Likely looking for a way to keep the images fresh, the developers keep changing the background behind him. While this admittedly does keep the FMV from going stale, it also implies that Louis is constantly moving around the stage. Worse still, since the backgrounds don't match the in-game changes, it looks like you're experiencing the game from two completely different locations. You in the scary empty warehouse, and Louis on some stage set somewhere. The sound is fairly bland, but they do have Louis reading off every question, which is an impressive amount of voice clips. He'll also voice the number one answers. There is some minor voice work from the family members, but it's not as cool as Wheel of Fortune was. Control is your standard virtual keyboard variety, but once again, on the weirdness chart, they don't have all the key commands on screen. I was hustling over to the delete button to correct my mistakes, only to discover 3 rounds later that the shoulder buttons are actually delete and spacer. It shows in the manual, but not on screen. It would have been nice to know. But it's finally come down to the whole reason we're here, the surveys. What should have been the safe bet is instead, with confusion and weirdness, has become an even bigger question. We'll start with the craziest one. My very first game to test out my guide was glitched. The 4th of 5 answers should have been glassware. I typed in correctly twice and got told it was not an answer, even though the autocomplete was right there to confirm it. Sure enough, when it came time for the computer opponent to steal, they did steal with the word glassware, and they won. Now, on the positive, my guide is correct. However, what the hell? I played through another 3 games and truthfully saw everything there was to see. But the final weirdness I mentioned comes from the questions asked. Some eye-opening surveys that can be taken the wrong way are in there. For starters, name a country you wouldn't feel safe visiting, and then they ramble off a whole bunch of real-world countries. Even funnier, right after that, name a country that, at least recently, violates its people's human rights, and the United States made it on at number 6. Now, I don't know in-game if they only show up to number 5 for that one, but Who is asking these questions? Like, how? There are other questions that I know are just poking fun at stereotypes, but when combined with the other examples, it starts to get really cringy. For example, name a food even a new bride is sure to know how to cook comes across quite sexist, especially when name a kind of place where mothers lose their children exists rather than a parent instead of the word being used. I will say, name a pastime that used to be associated only with intellectuals and snobs was kind of a funny one. I know it sounds a little bit nitpicky, but when several of these are strung together, you start wondering about who was writing the questions and who was being interviewed. As a final note, and to sneak in one more tally mark on the weirdness board, are the typos. Look, no one is perfect, and I know firsthand just from all the typos I've corrected on the website. But there's a lot of text in this game, and there should not be this many typos even with this amount of text. Just from a few mouse scrolls, I already stumbled into 6 of them, and this isn't including the odd use of hyphens or spaces everywhere. The more important angle here is that if there are this many typos in the answers, it might explain why the glassware issue happened. There are also likely typos in the code. Between you and me, I don't feel the need to track any of them down. About the only thing the game does right is the fast money round, where the 2 family members try to combine scores for the big $10,000 prize. My only complaint here is that they don't tell you what the number 1 answer is, likely so you don't just guess that the next time you play through, so I can kind of see. At the end of the day, there are 2 questions you need to ask in reviewing Family Feud. First, is the core game there that you want and love? Yes, easily. Second, does it meet the standards of other game show titles on the system? No, not really. But then, when you're asking questions about who else would have a human name or having to name something that lays eggs, maybe we really don't need to take ourselves so seriously. On the review scale, it's an average 5 out of 10. If all you're looking for is just a way to play Family Feud, this works just fine. If you're looking for a true reflection of the TV show's history and past, it's not going to work at all. All right, guys. Yeah, just while I was working on the guide, I was starting to play through it, and just like this, like it's so weird. Also of concern is if you have real hardware and you're trying to play on a modern TV, the FMV clips and one of the family screens are a different resolution than all the other family screens. So if you have a modern flat screen TV that does the auto resolution, if you try and play this on real hardware, all you're going to see is basically black screen for most of the time because it can't catch up with the resolution changes on the fly as fast as the CRTs did. Now it did work okay on the Polymega in emulation. And actually that's where the glassware problem happened. So who knows? It's just really weird. Man, what's your favorite game show? Let me know in the comment section. Let me know if you've played this, if you liked it or not. Be safe. Take care. I'm here when you need me. See you later.